and she comes with her right-hand woman, Lisa, and yesterday she had a bad accident on the way here, and so they've both been up at the Gold Coast all night. Carol is coming, but she'll be late, I reckon. So Steve Bolt is here, and I'm going to put him on now to give you some legal advice. Steve came to Lismore via the Redfern Legal Centre, and he's a rare creature, one of those lawyers who isn't in it just for the money. So he's helped us at the Hemp Embassy and Mardi Gras for 20 years probably. Is that right, Steve? He's written books on cannabis law reform. He's your man. Thanks for coming, Steve.
This one is on?
New South Wales law.
Button, there's a button. We're on now.
Talking New South Wales law?
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. Person just asked about New South Wales. Just a show of hands before we start. Who's from Queensland? Yeah. Quite a few. The law I'm going to talk about is mostly the same. What's different from state to state is some detail about the maximum fine, for example, might be a little bit different from Queensland and New South Wales, but the general principles are the same. I'll do my best to cover Queensland. I'm a New South Wales lawyer, don't practice in Queensland, don't really know Queensland law in terms of all that detail, but I'll do my best to cover that.
Steve, I meant to tell people ladies' toilets is just here and men should go around there.
Look, what I wanted to do today was just really, we've got about half an hour, I think, not quite sure, but half an hour or thereabouts. Mostly going to be question and answer. I just want to say a couple of brief things by way of introduction, generally around the legal status of cannabis, medicinal or otherwise, and a little bit about driving, because the driving laws present a difficulty for many, many people who are in that medicinal cannabis space. First things first though, medicinal cannabis is pretty much illegal. There is a legal regulation system that is almost impossible for most people to get through, so there's a very small number of people who can use medicinal cannabis legally. That is, if you get a prescription from a doctor, we can go through, well, I'm not going to go through all the details of that. To go through all the details of that would take 15 hours to explain it all, and I don't understand it all, so I'm not going to try to mislead people about the details. But broadly speaking, unless you're able to get a prescription from a doctor for a medicinal cannabis product, you are breaking the law to use cannabis. Having said that, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, I'm just saying it's against the law. The practical consequences may be not nearly as bad as you might first think, so overall my advice to you as a legal advice would be, if it's doing you some good, continue to do that. The chances of having any legal trouble are fairly minor, and the sort of scale of the problem is probably pretty minor as well. I can come back and explain some of that perhaps in a minute. The issue about driving is that in both Queensland and New South Wales, it's an offence to drive a vehicle with the presence of THC in saliva. I think most people are probably aware now that police do random testing for alcohol, as they've been doing for 30, 40 years, whatever that's been, but more recently, the last 10 years or so, testing for drugs in saliva. The drugs they test for are THC, not cannabis, but THC, MDMA, methamphetamine, and in New South Wales cocaine as well, but not Queensland just yet. So I don't suppose there's any stockbrokers here to worry about cocaine, but it's THC and not CBD, okay? So if you're using a product that is mostly CBD, there could be, I've heard Deb say a couple of times, it's very, very difficult to have completely THC-free products. So chances are there will be some THC, might be low-dose THC, probably some THC in the oil or tincture you might be using. There might be a higher dose than that as well, but it's a problem. The difficulty is that there's no sort of cut-off, so it's just the presence, the offence is to drive with the presence of THC that's detected. The way it gets detected, random testing usually. I can't speak for Queensland, but certainly New South Wales, I suspect it's the same in Queensland. Every highway patrol has the little swabs that they use. They sometimes have sort of setups, buses and 4 or 5 cop cars, and pull you over and just for everybody that goes past. But broadly speaking, the system is there's an initial swab. If that is a positive indicator to a drug, they take you to a police station, take a second sample. That sample is then tested through a machine, which is fairly unreliable, but just say that in passing, tested through a machine, and then that sample is sent on to a laboratory. This is the same New South Wales, Queensland, and it's the laboratory that looks at that sample to see if there's any THC present. Just going to talk about THC. It's the same for other drugs, but this just talk about THC, it's easier. If they find THC, then slightly different from Queensland, New South Wales. In New South Wales, if you're a first offender, that is no bad driving record, etc. Many people have been in that category. You are given a fine notice, $590, I think is fairly hefty, and automatically suspended from driving for 3 months. In Queensland, you go to court. It's a slightly different situation there in terms of process. In New South Wales, if it's not your first offence, for example, and so on, then you go straight to court with the charge. The option for people who get one of those tickets, or the option for people who have to go to court, is to say to the magistrate what you want to say, either yourself or through a lawyer, that it was having no impact on your driving, that it was there was no effective danger, I suppose, to the public from the presence of the THC. The evidence that's given to the court doesn't have any reading, it's just presence. They get a short certificate from an analyst from the laboratory that says they found THC present in your sample, but not that it was high or low dose or anything, or high or low reading, just that it was a reading. So most people, many people have get the benefit, I suppose, of discretion from the magistrate and don't have a conviction recorded, and therefore don't get their licence disqualified, don't get their licence suspended. The legal mechanism to disqualify is on conviction. Being found guilty is not necessarily the same as being convicted of an offence. The magistrate can decide to find you guilty of an offence but not impose a conviction, and therefore you get to keep your licence. If you get a fine, that is because you're a first offender and so on, either because you don't want to pay the $590, which is probably an issue for many people, you can't afford that, maybe $50 or $100, the magistrate can reduce the fine, but more importantly, the magistrate could consider not imposing a conviction, and therefore you get to keep your licence. It's called Section 10, good old Section 10 of the legislation that allows the magistrate to do that. Again, that's New South Wales, Queensland, different provision, same sense, but it's a different section of a different act, and so the sort of technicalities are a little bit different there. And that's highly recommended. I haven't actually seen the most recent statistics, but it was something like 50% or a bit more than 50% of people on these charges in New South Wales were getting off without conviction. So the magistrates across the state were being sensible, in my view, and dealing with people who had reasonably good records, etc., allowing them to keep their licence. And that's why the government changed the rules last year to make it an automatic fine, automatic disqualification, automatic suspension, 3 months suspension, and then you've got to choose to go to court. I would recommend for many people choose to go to court. In terms of the laws generally about cannabis are the same stupid laws we've had for many, many years. Depends on the activity, possession, supply, cultivation, all separate offences, depending on the quantity of the drug involved, your prior record, etc., and the activity. It depends how serious the legal trouble will be. Possession of 5 or 10 grams of cannabis, first offence, is almost always no conviction recorded. No big drama, other than the stress of having to go to court and the nuisance of it all. Cultivating, 600 plants, probably looking at jail time there. So it really depends on the range. The range depends on the nature of the activity. And again, it's similar for New South Wales or Queensland about what kind of trouble you're in. Okay, so if that makes enough sense as a way of sort of broad introduction, I think probably the most productive way of spending the next 20 minutes or so is questions and answers. So fire away and I'll do my best.
Steve, is it possible to grow marijuana in New South Wales?
It's possible. It's possible to grow. Yes, it's possible. It is possible without conviction. Yes, without conviction. Again, it's a matter for the discretion of the magistrate, so you can't sort of ever guarantee that. People who... It's really difficult. What is really helpful with Section 10 or no conviction is having a good prior record. once you start to get into more and more trouble, it's more difficult for that outcome. So you might have a case where someone's found guilty of growing 5 plants, but it's their 10th offence or something, so you're not going to get no conviction on that. Someone might be growing 25, 30, 40 plants, first offence. Particularly if there's a medicinal aspect to the cultivation, many magistrates will give you a section 10 on 30, 40 plants if that's the situation that they accept is the truth about that's what you're doing it for. So medical evidence from doctors, etc., is very helpful. It's an offence to supply cannabis for medicinal purposes. Should make that very clear. To grow cannabis, there's no kind of legal defence. So it's not legal, but it's a way in which the courts can be more lenient in terms of penalty than otherwise, perhaps.
Judges sort of found by, or is there some sort of rule in place or guide in place to say that when you grow cannabis, you're not allowed to use the medical defence as part of your evidence?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the medical defence, if people heard the question.
I reckon if you've got a question, if you can, if you come up the front, everyone can hear.
It is very hard in this space to appear. If you've got a microphone, it's great, but otherwise it's very difficult.
Repeat the question, sister, got it.
Or perhaps just stand up if you could, mate.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether you can use medical benefits in the defence, whereas I've heard that you can't say, oh, well, it's proven because it's not legal, so you're not allowed to say anything about medical.
I guess the best way to answer that is to say that from a judge or magistrate's point of view, their job is not to make a comment or decide whether the law makes sense or not, but to apply the law. Right? Now, happily, the legal system is run by humans, not by machines, so every judge and magistrate will have their own views about it, and those views will necessarily have an impact about the way they approach cases. However, it is not a legal defence to say this is a stupid law, or the law should be different, or there's a medicinal benefit to cannabis and therefore the law should not apply to me. It doesn't work like that. It's taken into account in terms of the penalty, and the judges and magistrates will often say to people, you should go and see your doctor, try to get a prescription, and I think we all know, at least in general terms, how impossible that is in practical terms, but it's not as such a medical use is not a defence in the sense of it does not make the activity, possession, supply, cultivation, a legal activity. It remains against the law unless, if you're a manufacturer, you've got a licence from the federal government. If you're a cultivator, you've got a licence from the federal government. If you're a supplier, an importer, you've got a licence from the federal government. If you're a prescriber, if you're a doctor, you've gone through the 18-month process of getting the permission to prescribe to your patient, and then the person with the script is lawfully entitled to have their product, which is, I think, again, most people know, not any kind of cannabis, but the product prescribed to them, which has got to be in a form of an oil or a tincture or some kind of manufactured product. You can't, it's not possible now to legally use raw cannabis, even with a prescription. Yes?
I've only got a quiet voice, so I'll come down.
Grab the mic.
Okay. Just switch the button. Switch the button. Okay. Can you hear me? Now? Yep. I've been taking CBD oil for a month now, and I was told it had 1% THC in it. My impression was that if I got pulled over, that wouldn't actually show, but what you've just said, it could show up on a saliva test. Is that what? Yeah. Okay.
The real problem is no one really knows. At a practical level, the way the police operate is they will do random tests. I've been stopped a couple of times the last year or so, just out of luck or something, for breath tests. Right, just happens. First time in years and years and years. Oh yeah, pull over. Driving down the road a couple of weeks ago, they pulled me over, and that's all. They do a breath test and then drive on. because I must look respectable enough. If you're a hippie, not so. If you're young, if you've got long hair, if you're driving a combi, there's all sorts of wrongness about it. But depending on what you look like and what your record is, all police cars now have a in-car computer with your driving record pretty much visible to them, right? There's alerts if they drive past someone with, driving an unregistered car or with a suspended licence or something, a little ping and they might pull you over. So many people are at more danger of being tested for the saliva test than others, all right? So a lot of people who are medicinal cannabis users, and if I can look around the room because I can see everybody, I think it's fair to say that most people in this room stopped by police would not be tested for drugs. They'd just be an ordinary breath test. They like to do 10 or 20 a day, so they just get their numbers up, but they don't have to do any number of drug tests. They usually get enough young people they can do the drug testing on anyway in their sort of normal sort of trawl, and so you're probably pretty safe, practically speaking. Where they have a setup that is if you come to Mardi Gras, please do. You'll find every entrance into town has a bus at it, and the chances of them being pulled over and being required to do a saliva test are greater. Then yes, you might be tested there. Whether you're going to test positive or not, anecdotally, all sorts of people say, gee, I had a smoke and I drove down the road and half an hour later got pulled over and they said, oh no, it was tested and I was fine. It just really is difficult to say you will or you will not be found to be against in breach of the law. It's probably very idiosyncratic. It's probably a matter of how much you've used in the past and probably how much is in your system, in my view. If you're a kind of regular user, then you're probably going to be more likely to test positive. With the medicinal products where there's a 1% or a very low dosage or low percentage of THC, I've certainly had clients who told me that they've used a product where they thought there was almost no THC or hardly any, and they've tested positive, so it can happen. But I really can't say everybody's safe if it's only 1% or everybody's at danger if it's 1%. The practical answer to the dilemma is that most people who are in the room today would not be at risk of being tested in that ordinary situation, so go for it. And if you do get tested and you do get positive, then the process of going to court and explaining that to the magistrate doesn't make it legal to drive with the THC present, and it's a little bit in the background, but if your record's pretty good, driving record's pretty good, then you're looking pretty good in terms of getting you to keep your licence.
Can I just?
Oh, sorry, Michael's got the microphone. So
just say something on the saliva thing that Steve can't say so easily. Probably, it's a good question. For the CBD to work well, it's got to have probably 1% THC or 0.5% THC. That's just a fact. That's the whole plant. Same philosophy as whole food. If you isolate a bit out, it doesn't seem to work as well. So half the people coming to Nimbin for medical cannabis don't try it because of the saliva testing. It's just huge. And fact is, I think Steve's right, not many people will lose their licence. But the whole humiliation of it, the whole bust, the whole going to court is a nightmare. So most of us have been busted in Nimbin. And you can register with the CBD, it's true. But did you explain the 3 tests system? There's 3 tests that happen. They put you up, and the first test is this little, you scrape your tongue. And if that's positive, then they arrest you and you have to give a bigger saliva sample, which they test, but they also send to a lab for a 3rd test. The lab picks up everything, down to the tiniest amount. I think, 98% of samples sent to the lab came back positive, something like that. So the bit I want to tell you is, the story is truck drivers carry a chocolate milk. Clean your teeth well. Everyone around here carries a fisherman's friend or a peppermint lolly or a drink with them, and if you do get pulled over, you get some moisture in your mouth and you fill a little pad with that. So the other big thing, I think, is the police prosecutor in Lismore actually said, is it smoke residue in your mouth, Steve? But if you have a capsule, it won't come up. So it's pretty interesting, and like Steve said, it's all up in the air, but it's a big obstacle for people. I reckon be smart, don't worry about it if you really want to try cannabis. But it is a risk. And unfortunately, the Premier, Gladys in New South Wales, told the police they've got to do 100,000 tests, so it's heaps of tests. They've destroyed Mardi Gras by putting roadblocks on every road and testing everyone, so lots of people don't come. It's just not about impairment, but they will work it out. It's a global problem, but Victorian, Australian police, Victoria in particular, are kind of leading the world charge on this. They've found a way. We reckon they're probably in on the contract, but that's another... Anyway, it is a big issue. Your question was really big, and I'm not quite sure how everyone's got to deal with it in their own way.
Yeah, fella there.
Is it only the driver that can get tested?
Yes, just the driver. They don't test passengers or just the driver. Yep.
Right, so just going back to this lady's question, so if you take the CBD for say 1% THC, you do it nightly, how long does that then stay on your tongue? Because wouldn't it be gone by the morning?
Yeah,
or?
it's gone.
It has. So.
I reckon gone. But
Yeah.
if you fail the first test, which is not 100% accurate, the third test will pick it up. It stays in your system for days, definitely. Me smoking every day, months.
8 days.
Right, so even that tiny amount of THC
Yeah.
would be...
And if you take it every day, it can stay in your system for up to 70 days.
And the illegal cannabis is still not allowed to drive. And they're saying wait 6 days.
With the smoke, but with the edibles, they're saying, it's gone within a few hours.
Great. I think edibles capture. Clean your teeth well. Don't worry about it.
Dental hygiene. Yeah, more of that. More of that. Brush your teeth 5 times a day. I'll get to this question in a moment, but look, I can tell you what I know, and this is just from my experience doing lots and lots of these cases. The testing at the lab goes down to 10 nanograms of THC per 100 mil. That nanogram is 1 billionth of a gram. Tiny, 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 tiny. We're talking about THC components of maybe 1%, 5%, 10% or whatever in a product. So we're talking about reasonably, particularly in the concentrated tinctures and oils, reasonably concentrated products. So you're going to have some THC in your system. And very, very likely that will be picked up by the lab. It's a bit hit and miss, though, about what the swab does. The swab is just an indicator. They take that, they throw it away. They don't use that, they don't send that to the lab. It's just an indicator about whether you have to go through that second round of testing or not, okay? So a lot of people just, from what they tell me, even though they know think they've got a fair bit of THC probably in their system, get through that swab, just get through it. Either because they brush their teeth 5 times a day, or because they've had some chocolate milk, or they've had a fisherman's friend, or whatever it is that they might have done. But those solutions seem to be fairly effective in various ways. So maybe do all of those things. Have the chocolate milk, then brush your teeth, because that's the right way around to do it. But you can't sort of guarantee, I suppose. What they do test is, if it gets to the lab, is down to very, very, very low levels. 10 micrograms, for goodness sake. It's,
10 parts per billion.
Yeah. It's not brushing your teeth, it's brushing your tongue.
Well, your whole mouth, yes.
Swabbing your tongue.
It's not just your teeth. It's yes. I don't know about the science. We've run a few cases, as I said. We had the police scientist, their expert, came to court one day to tell us all about all this. More than once she's done that. But her view, and this was what Mike was talking about before, the official police pharmacologist says, and other pharmacologists say it's all probably nonsense, is that the way it works is it's from the THC that remains in your mouth after consumption. So therefore, if you smoke, if you eat something, it's just what is left in your mouth, just the saliva in your mouth. And therefore they say, oh, it should be a few hours, but it's only an hour at the most, maybe a few hours. They used to say on the website in New South Wales, up to 12 hours it could be detected. They've changed that now. It just says a significant time after you use it can still be detected. Who really knows? But what the government pharmacologist, police pharmacologist said was it's only from what's left in your mouth. So if that's true, I don't think it is necessarily true, if that's true, the better you can clean your mouth out or you can mask it, the more chances you're going to have. There's a different view, which is, I suspect, probably more accurate, that THC can get back into your saliva by going through your system, through your body, and then come back into your saliva. So not just the depot effect, as they call it, not just what's left there, but it can come back in. No one really knows. It's all fairly new science. The testing's been around for about 10 years or so. The police have been wanting to do this for a long, long, long time, but they've only recently been able to do something that's fairly effective in the sense of practical, of having some way of measuring THC in saliva other than taking blood samples from drivers, which I don't want to do.
There is one guarantee. I can't recommend it. People reckon if you've got a can of Coke and you swish your mouth up, nothing will register. I just can't recommend you do that. There you
go. Or Pepsi, for that matter. Yep. Someone had their hand up, but I've come to there was, so this person here. There is no level. It's the test is presence, so it's not like alcohol where there's a 0.05.
Because I've got testers at home, and they go down to, although it's just above 25 nanograms.
It's 10 nanograms. 10 nanograms. 10 nanograms.
25.
No, what they test for, the answer to the question is what they test for is 10 nanograms. When it goes to the lab, if it's 10 nanograms or less, if it's 5 nanograms, the machine's set to 5 nanograms to sort of look at it, and they'll pick it up, but they report 10 nanograms. Okay, so between 5 and 10, they just see it there but don't report it. If it's 10 or above, they report it. That is, they send a certificate back to the police to say, found THC present.
Can you buy your own tester?
The swabs are about $40, $45 a go. So that's your taxpayers' dollars at work. 100,000 of those in New South Wales. One use, throw them away. So taxpayers' money are being so useful. It doesn't really help. You might test yourself and think you're okay, and the police might test you an hour later and think you're not okay. The device itself is a bit like a pregnancy test. You put the sort of liquid on the bit of the thing and a blue line comes up or doesn't come up. Sometimes the police just read that, I reckon, and think, oh, that's negative and throw it away, but it might have been, someone else might have thought it was positive. So the danger you have by doing your own, not that I'm saying you shouldn't do it, but doing your own, it's expensive to do it every time you drive. And secondly, you might kind of misread that, or you might read it differently to what a police officer would read it in the, taking a sample a short time later. You want to go again?
So for chronic pain, I've found that I just need to take it every day. So is that getting a cumulative effect, and is that going to be a higher reading?
It's a question we don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to. My personal view is yes, it does. That the more you use, the more likely you are to test positive. The pharmacologist, the alleged scientist from the police says no. But my view is that it probably does. And that's from talking to our expert evidence, our pharmacologists who say it's not clear science. The amount of research that's gone into saliva testing is extremely limited, right? It's ridiculously limited. There's almost no science that indicates anything in terms of impact on driving. Leave that, they just don't look at that at all. I mean, there's no science about that 10 nanograms, 100 nanograms per 100 mil is going to have an effect on your driving. That doesn't exist. They haven't looked at that. What they have looked at is how long can they measure it for. Right? So they've had a number of sort of studies, very, very small numbers of people, give them some cannabis, measure their saliva after an hour, 2 hours, 10 hours, whatever, and how long can they pick it up? So that's what they're interested in. How long can we measure it for? So in those limited number of cases, and we're talking about less than 100 people in terms of the participants in those studies, tiny numbers in terms of world population, the longest detection period is about 12, 15 hours, okay? But we've had lots and lots of cases in the real world. People come to court, Lismore local court gets stacks of them, right? Where people say, it was the day before, right, Your Honour, it was 2 days before, I had a smoke on the Thursday night, got stopped on the Saturday, I was sure I'd be fine, and I wasn't, I still test positive. Some of those people are probably not telling the truth, hey. Hope everyone's okay about that. Some of those people are probably not, but they're not all lying. No, they can't all be lying. We have had hundreds and hundreds of people who say the same, explain the same, tell the same story to the police and to the magistrate. They're not all telling the truth, they're not all lying though either. Could you stand up there? Thank you.
You can buy tongue scrapers, and they're a really good tool to use every morning as well, which are really good part of oral care bubbles to get rid of any additional stuff in your tongue. And also, I have also used like just lemon, like the wedge of lemon, and had it in my mouth, and I got tested twice, and like once when I coming out of the festival, and smoked the night before, and I was absolutely fine. And I also know that apples have a bit of sticking out in your mouth. They're also really good tools. If you're just like worried about being tested, you can just have a little bit of that in your car, and you kind of just a little bit of peace of mind. Have you used apple cider vinegar? Yeah. Apple cider vinegar and also lemon, because it also helps like neutralise the acid. Yeah, it alkalizes the saliva in your mouth.
There's a limitless amount of herbs and lotions you can use. You can buy them off your tree, from that shop off your tree. You can use your own. You can use sulfuric acid, battery acid, coconut oil, you know. But basically you're just trying to mask and soak it up. But generally people go for coconut oil, apple ciders, alcohol wash, spit it out. Yeah.
I think my advice to you would be, if you were ever tested and
Speak up.
You stand up, please.
do not present yourself and just say, well, I would rather have this medicine for my chronic pain than take 2 morphine and be affected.
You could be a human rights activist too.
And what I would add to that, I agree with that. What I would add to that, and not it's up to me to tell people what medicine they should take, but what I would add to that is if you think cannabis is doing better for you than other medicinal products on the market in terms of opioids, etc., go for it. But secondly, it's better to do that and drive your car because you need to drive your car than use that and not drive. Because why stay at home? What's the point of staying at home? How's that going to be good for you? To be a prisoner, not being able to get to places because you've had your medicine that morning. It's cruel. It's beyond cruel, the law. But my advice to you would be take the risk. The risk is, practically speaking, very, very low for most people. And my advice would be take the risk. If you are unlucky enough to be caught up in the system, your chances of getting out of that reasonably unscathed, other than the stress involved, are very, very good. Yep. Senator, please.
If you get pulled up by the police,
Yep.
say that you're taking drugs,
Yep.
and you turn around and say, oh yeah, I smoked last night,
Yep.
and then they test it, it comes back negative, can they still arrest you? Because you've been taking
Good question. I think people have probably heard that. No. Logical or otherwise, the testing around driving, whatever the result, does not lead to charges about possession or use. Okay? And it does not also, in my experience, lead to searches of the vehicle either. Testing positive does not lead to a search in itself. Okay? So you can go to court, you can tell the magistrate, yeah, I had a smoke, you can go to court and give evidence. I had a smoke the day before. Yeah, that's right. You do not get charged on the basis of what you've told the court or the police, so you can be safe there. Most people, when they're stopped by police, give some explanation about, the positive, mate, did you have a smoke today? Oh, no, not last night, sir. Best advice from all lawyers is don't answer questions like that. Don't tell the police anything. So I'll repeat that standard advice that lawyers give. You have the right to silence, one of our very few rights, really. You have the right to silence when you're in the company of a police officer being asked questions. My advice would be generally to exercise that right, unless you're absolutely sure you know what you're talking about, which most people frankly don't. Then exercise your right to silence. It can't make anything worse, but most people do in fact want to say something. Most people do want to tell the police something. Some will explain, I'm a medical user, I had a smoke 3 days ago, I thought I'd be fine. Whatever you say is written down on the police summary, the sheet they give to the court, the fact sheet so-called, and whatever you say is there, and then you kind of, in a sense, stuck with the conversation, with your answer to the question. So it's there, but it does not lead to further charges.
When we're driving home and we get pulled over, I just say, I've been to a workshop for chronic pain.
Yeah.
Do you think you're allowed to lie on cannabis?
I think basically you just got to say nothing.
Say nothing. Say nothing. Say nothing. Say nothing. Look, the best thing is to say nothing. If you have to go to court, that's when you get a chance to say something, right? You probably don't have to go to court. You know, approach on the basis you probably won't have any trouble. Probably.
I'm not sure I agree. I reckon you say no. No, I haven't smoked any cannabis. I think you're allowed to lie under prohibition on that. Quite a lot of people here think it's good to say, oh, I did have a beer this morning, then they breathalyse you.
All sorts of cunningness, I suppose. It's not an offence to lie, just by the way. There's no law that says you can't lie. You can't lie on oath. You can't go to court and swear an oath and then lie. That's perjury. You can't make a sworn statement and lie, but you can lie. I mean, whether you do or not, that's perhaps a moral issue, but there's no law about telling lies. So you can tell a lie to a police officer and you're not committing any offence. I guess the old sort of, what all our parents told us all that time, you tell a lie, you have to, make sure you know what you told a lie, you have to have a good memory for a lie, you've got to remember what you said, see you tell the truth. All those kind of problems come up if you end up in the legal system having told a lie to begin with, but it is not a criminal offence to tell a lie, absolutely. So if that's what you want to do, you can.
So what's a non-offensive thing to say?
Stand up,
You've got to speak up, no one can hear.
So what is the appropriate answer? Because if a policeman asks me a question, say nothing, or a smart ass, it agitates me.
Yeah. I would lie. Don't say I'm not saying anything, it's totally sus. That's the lawyers, they have to tell you that. But as soon as you say, oh, it's I'm not going to tell you that, you're guilty. So I've given myself permission to lie on that. Have you smoked cannabis this morning? No. But I did have a beer, Your Honour, and maybe I should breathalyse.
We've got two lawyers on the stage.
Yeah.
A bush lawyer.
I am not a lawyer.
Bush lawyer.
It is the most important conversation here in some ways today. It's stopping heaps of people using cannabis. It is a really bad law. Honestly, I think there's a big story. Victorian police have the contract to supply all these things. It's quite possibly very true and really corrupt. It's a weapon police are using on us, not likely you. It's more the recreational user, as they would say, they're targeting. And they're quite active at Byron Bay a lot. Any music festivals, they're big. Mardi Gras, if they want to bust a heap of people, they just set up on the Nimbin Lismore Road. It's a joke. But I think Sister's right. You scrape your tongue, you clean your teeth, you maybe carry a drink or something that'll make liquid, and don't worry about it. My advice, only non-legal.
Look, it is an important question, and at the risk of dwelling, if you tell a lie and you test positive, it goes back to the court, and the police say in the statement they give to the court, the driver said she had not been smoking, but it came back positive. Does it matter? Not really. The magistrate's not going to deal with the case any better or worse if you've told a lie to the police. Okay, so to that extent I'm not unhappy with what Michael's saying to you, but in the formal sense, the police in these cases or any other case, the right to silence is this. The right to silence means the police, the prosecutor, cannot say to a court anything about your refusal or declining to answer a question or to make a comment. Right? If they're allowed to comment on it, allowed to say, oh, he wouldn't say anything, he must be guilty, then what sort of right to silence is that? The right to silence is in fact the right or the obligation, one of the laws that is in fact very strongly applied. They cannot say a word of any interpretation to be taken about whether you said anything or didn't say anything. The real problem though is the humanity of it all. When people talk to you, you have to talk back. Yeah? Whoever says nothing when someone's talking to you? Nobody. If someone says hello, you've got to say hello. You don't want everyone says something back. Police talk to you. Your instinct is, we're all brought up that way. We probably would have been, in any culture. We reply. Police say, have you had a smoke today? You can say, oh, I don't want to say anything about that. You can say, I don't want to answer the question. You can say, look, I've had advice. I don't think I want to answer any questions. I don't want to make any statement or answer any questions. Oh, okay, I'll write that down. It doesn't make any practical difference if it gets to court. If they test it negative, no problem at all. Sorry, if they test negative, they don't ask. If they do the swab, negative, you just drive on, okay? If they take you back to the police station, positive there, they ask you questions about have you been using or not using, then you can say, I don't want to answer any questions about that. You can say it was this morning, last night, 5 weeks ago. Whatever you say, it is recorded and given to the court. So you know, it's written down, but if you say nothing, that's also written down.
So
Go.
they don't ask if you've had a smoke, they ask if you've had any illicit drugs.
Yeah. Sorry.
I said no, because it's not an illicit drug to me.
I can tell you, hippies, I am not a comfortable liar at all. But they do. They're going to ask you straight up, you know, have you had any illicit substances today? They also ask if you got any in your car. You know, I think it's okay to lie sometimes. Anyway, Steve is right. Generally, the answer is, I went to a Medican in Nimbin and the lawyer said, I don't have to tell you anything except my name and address. Is that right? Name and address. Right. The lawyer said I mustn't tell you anything. I'm scared of the lawyer, so, you know.
Scary lawyer. You have to tell them, if you're a driver, you have to tell the police your name and address. That's the only thing you have to tell them, it's just to be accurate.
Show them your licence.
Show them your licence. You've got to give your name and address. That's a regulation about drivers, not passengers, not people walking down the street, but if you're a driver, that is pretty much the only exception.
Steve, you could always keep your silence and just be polite, and when you're in court you could say I ate a Girl Scout cookie without knowing, or someone spiked my food, you know, you can think about your defence, you don't have to declare it on the road.
You can say nothing and then tell a story to the court, if I put it that way.
Can you say that you're in this narrow little bar in Nimbin and it happened to be 4:20 and you're inhaling all this smoke and you didn't smoke yourself but you walked out and it's in your mouth?
Yep. It gets a bit complicated in a way to just say yes or no. Yes, you can say that. The way the law works for the driving test is it's what they call a strict liability offence, okay? So, like all driving offences are the same. The police don't have to prove that you deliberately were speeding. They don't have to prove you were intentionally driving through a stop sign, okay? They just have to prove you went through a stop sign. That's the kind of offence. Give you a ticket for that. Same with saliva, having THC in your saliva. They don't have to prove that you intended to, or even that you knew you were driving with saliva. The defence, though, if you want to run it to a hearing, is to say you had an honest and reasonable belief that you would not test positive. That is, you honestly thought it had been a week since you last you consumed a product. I thought after a week, for goodness sake, I'd be absolutely fine, should have known that. When the website at New South Wales used to say 12 hours, people would say, look, I looked at the website and, you know, it said 12 hours. I thought after, 2 days I had to be fine because it said 12 hours. I thought I was fine. It was a reasonable thing for me to believe what the government told me. 12 hours was the window of detection. I waited 12 hours plus a bit longer. I was fine. Okay, and they're the cases we've had success, where the magistrate has accepted and believed that version, but it's a matter of the defendant putting up a positive defence to say that I had an honest belief, reasonably based belief that it was not going to be positive. Not that you're not breaking the law, that's a legal question. The factual question, is there THC in your saliva? That's a matter of fact. It is or isn't, but if you thought there wasn't, that's a mistake of fact on your part. There is evidence that it was there, you thought it wasn't, then you have a case. So we've run cases where passive smoking is the explanation for why it was there, and I didn't think it was going to be there. I was at Nimbin, people were smoking at a cafe. I've got my car and drove away. I thought it'd be okay, but so yes, it's background. It's not as simple though as saying it's an absolute defence to the charge by saying it was passive, because they don't have to prove you intended. You then have to go through that rigmarole of proving an honest and reasonable mistake, which means more days in court, a whole hearing. Dr. Pearl from the police pharmacologist, telling the magistrate that what you're saying is not possible because it's only detected after a few hours and how could it be possible, and there's no evidence about passive smoking. Yeah. But the magistrate may or may not believe Dr. Pearl. They sometimes do. They sometimes don't. They should never believe Dr. Pearl.
We should finish up soon. Steve, did I hear you right then that you would recommend, if people are busted, to actually pay the fine and go to court?
Yes.
Pretty much?
Yes.
Yeah, good on you.
Sorry, I'll keep turning this microphone off to stop things. Yes, my recommendation, if you get a fine, don't pay it, go to court. Two things will happen. There'll be a delay. You'll probably you get to keep driving. You'll probably get a lower fine than $591 because most people will be able to say, I can't afford that. I don't think there is stockbrokers. We checked that before. There seem to be no stockbrokers in the room, so I think we're pretty safe to say most people in the room would have a bit of trouble finding $590 to pay. And the magistrate, okay, you're on a limited income, okay, I'll bring the fine down. at the least, okay? Secondly, if you've got a good record, and otherwise you may have a very good chance of keeping your licence, which is the main thing. If you get a fine, you lose your licence, okay? Queensland difference, right? Queensland, you can get fined and be not convicted. In New South Wales, if you get a fine, it's only if you get convicted. Sorry, the other way around. If you don't get convicted in New South Wales, all the magistrate can do is dismiss the case, so no penalty at all, or put you on a good behaviour bond. So you could get a no conviction with a bond, or no conviction and no penalty, but you can't get a fine and no conviction. It's the conviction that leads to the disqualification, the suspension. Okay, it's that status. So magistrates will look at your record, look at the circumstances. A very, very typical case, medicinal cannabis user, had a bit of a tincture in the morning, stopped at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, wasn't affecting my driving. This is my first offence. I've been driving for 35 years. Here's my record. I had a speeding ticket in 1990-something. That's my only thing in my record. Magistrate say, see you later. You keep your licence. Case dismissed. Okay? So the outcomes are pretty good. The process is not so simple. You've got to go to court a couple of times before that hearing date's set, etc. You may or may not have to pay a lawyer, which will cost you some money. There's no legal aid for these cases. You might be able to run it yourself. If you're going to run a hearing, probably in terms of the honest and reasonable mistake, I'd recommend legal advice and representation for that because it gets quite technical. But in terms of going to court on the ticket to say you can't afford it or you want to keep your licence, that's something almost everyone can do themselves without a lawyer, putting the profession out of business, let me say, but you don't need a lot of legal skill to do that. You need a bit of common sense and some clarity about thinking and the ability, the confidence to speak in court. It's not that hard. A lot of people do it. And if you've got a fairly simple story to tell, my record's good, Your Honour, and they'll see what your record is. I'm a medicinal user. I was fine. It wasn't affecting my driving. Yeah, okay. Particularly the record. If the record's good, that's when you get a good result.
Got to thank Steve heaps for coming today. Thanks very much. Giving up his Saturday. I appreciate it.
I'm around for a little while longer outside, so in terms of, never like to talk one-to-one about